And now up is our second feature, Tony Richardson's The Loved One. I've been dragging my feet when it comes to watching this movie for
your entire life.
My entire life. Roger really loves it, and I've heard other people love it, but also one of the things that made it really kind of touching for me to sit down and finally watch it, the guy who more or less set me on this road of movie buffdom was my stepfather, Kurt Zastavil. And Kurt brought up The Loved One quite a bit over the course of the years that I was with him. And in fact, I'm positive now because we were talking about this. The Loved One is the last Kurt movie I had never seen. I've seen all the other ones that he made a point of talking about and exalting the virtues of, and The Loved One is the only one that I haven't seen. Something about it held me off from seeing it, but also I guess part of the reason I never got around to seeing it is I liked Kurt's version of it.
His description.
I suspect I might have even liked it more than the actual movie, so I've kind of held it kind of precious, but it was time for me to see it, and Roger loves the film, and so here we are now. And we finally watched The Loved One. I will read the back of the box, and then I will hand the discussion to Roger, and then I will join in. Okay?
All righty. Loved One, 1965.
Okay, so this is an MGM-UA box, unfortunately the smaller kind, not the cool, larger kind, square kind that we like. It would be from the classic section under the L's. Billed as the motion picture with something to offend everybody, The Loved One gloriously and outrageously fulfills its promise. Absolutely nothing is sacred in this blistering black comedy on the Southern California way of life. ... and death. A simple vacation visit evolves into a wildly chaotic roller coaster ride through Los Angeles for a young English poet, Robert Morris, from How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Based on Evelyn Waugh's classic novella, actually, the satire slings its venom-tipped arrows at such targets as the mortuary business, both human and pet variety, religious cults, the military, Hollywood, British expatriates, and the space race. The star-studded cast features Rod Steiger as Mr. Joyboy, Jonathan Winters in a dual role, John Gielgud, and a 13-year-old Paul Williams. I've heard he was actually 25 when he did it. He just looked 13.
Yeah.
Plus cameos by Milton Berle, Tab Hunter, James Coburn, Roddy McDowall, Robert Morley, and Liberace, who is especially great. But perhaps most unforgettable, I disagree with this, even though, well, I don't know about the unforgettable part, but perhaps the most unforgettable and disgusting is Aileen Gibbons as Steiger's whale-like mother who gorges herself while watching TV.
Wow, they actually credited her on the box.
Approximate running time, 2 hours and 2 minutes. And the tape number of this Video Archives tape is 7554. Roger, tell us about your appreciation of The Loved One and why you wanted to watch it.
The thing about this movie is it comes a year after Dr. Strangelove. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously an answer to Dr. Strangelove. I brought with me my Laserdisc of the...
what does the cover look like?
Of the film. Mm-hmm. This signed by Paul Williams. I had him sign my disc. It's great. The comedy with something to offend everyone is also on the cover of this. And I noticed, and I hadn't noticed it for years, Paul Williams was in my film, The Rules of Attraction. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I was so excited to work with him. And Paul's such a nice guy. And I brought my Laserdisc for him to sign. And he signed it. And I hadn't really looked at it since then. And I never really thought much about what he wrote. But then, we watched the movie together and I was thinking about it and I pulled out my disc to look at it. And I noticed that what he had written was, Roger, it's not a rocket. Love, Paul Williams. Well, as you know, Dr. Strangelove, it's a dark comedy. Mm-hmm. It's a movie about essentially sex. It's a movie about sex. All the subtext in Dr. Strangelove is sex oriented. And it wasn't really until Paul Williams, I looked at this that Paul Williams had written on here, it's not a rocket. This is also same thing. Mm-hmm. It's about sex. Mm-hmm. It's about putting, let me see, what did I write here? If the rocket is a penis and we're putting stiffs into orbit or endeavoring to, then this movie really is a direct response to Dr. Strangelove. There is a kind of chaotic quality to the approach that speaks to me. Mm-hmm. What Tony Richardson is trying to do, really throughout his career, but mostly in this film, which was coming right on the heels of an Academy Award-winning film.
No, it's
a huge hit he had right before this.
Yeah, it's his I can do anything I want after this big success
and
movie.
This is exactly what you're supposed to do. A black and white evil and noir, social satire based on Hollywood and the mortuary industry.
No, I would buy that. I buy that.
That like you take that power and you wield it in the way that you should. And it's
even with an all-star cast.
You gather together an all-star cast and you make a movie that is out to literally offend. And while this movie may not seem so offensive now in its kind of wild, over-the-top, outrageous comedy in it, Haskell Wexler, who also was the DP and also produced the movie, has said, the movie may not any longer be in its social context. And so it might be different. And he kind of longed for more movies to push the boundaries of what was socially acceptable. And at the time,
I think his comment is right on the money, actually.
Yeah. And with this film, that was what they were trying to do. And while it may not read the same way to a modern audience, I can tell you that for me, when I was first exposed to this movie, like sometime around 1988 or so, it introduced me to a kind of filmmaking style that was comedic, but also dark. And I have a dark sense of humor and a kind of filmmaking approach that just sang to me. This kind of jumping out of scenes, and Hal Ashby, who edited the film, did a lot of like lapping of dialogue. So we're overhearing the previous scene and the next scene. And so it has this kind of editorial quality that I actually think it has had a large effect on how I approach movies and also even the structure of films. When I look at The Rules of Attraction now, which is such a every scene is seemingly disconnected from the scenes that follow. And
well, now that you actually pointing it out like that, no, there is kind of a Tony Richardson quality to that movie that you made. And I don't just mean based on The Loved One, based on a lot of his movies.
I always thought it was just The Prisoner that influenced me, that kind of editorial style and the cynicism and the kind of carnival-like view of the world. I always thought that was the real influence, but it turns out, it's Peter Medak and with The Ruling Class. It's Tony Richardson with this film. It's
Lindsay Anderson.
Absolutely Lindsay Anderson, especially with If and even Britannia Hospital.
And
Oh Lucky Man. Oh Lucky Man. The whole trilogy. The Lucky Man trilogy. It's kind of a trilogy.
No, it absolutely is a trilogy. It's just nice to hear offhandedly the Oh Lucky Man trilogy referred to.
And, in preparing for this, I started looking up Richardson and hearing what people had to say about him, what Anjanette Comer had to say about him, what John Calley, who was the studio head, behind it, had to say at the time.
Credited as producer along with Haskell Wexler.
And almost down the line, everybody said he's crazy. He's crazy. That's the guy to do this movie because he's crazy. And I can't tell you how many times in my life I've heard people tell me I'm crazy, that I have a kind of crazy approach to filmmaking, that what I'm looking for from actors is not often what's on the page. It's what they're bringing on the day, in the moment. And that in the moment, we make these discoveries that are surprising.
Well, Roger, I got to say, look, I'll go into this in a second. I didn't really care for the movie that much. However, the way you're describing it, it's making me realize there is a genuine connection between this movie in particular and Rules of Attraction.
For sure. Completely. And I never realized it more than when we watched it together.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't know if I
don't know why.
I don't know if I actually plugged it in while we were watching the movie, because I was actually kind of dealing a lot with the movie. The movie's a lot to deal with.
There's a hell of a lot going on.
The movie's a lot to deal with, but then just thinking about Tony Richardson's career in toto.
Yeah. And
then hearing you talk, I'm really realizing that, especially when it comes to this movie and Rules of Attraction, there is a connection, but also just even a connection of, which is almost even more important, methodology. Like, for instance, I can see Tony...
That's exactly what it is.
I can see Tony Richardson loving the idea of the Kip Pardue going to Europe and doing that entire thing.
We don't know what will happen.
Tony Richardson would think that's a great fucking idea. That would be the reason to fucking do the movie, as far as Tony Richardson is concerned. It's kind of the reason you fucking wanted to do the movie.
Exactly. And we are very similar, I've realized, as filmmakers and probably as men, that we're seeking to capture a kind of chaos. One of the things he said while watching the movie, and part of it was because of the print and the what the film looked like, but I think you said it looked like the Monkees.
Well, no, it evolved into the Monkees. Okay, at first I'm watching the film after hearing about it forever. I think on the back of the box, my jumping off point on the film is billed as the motion picture with something to offend everybody. Movie doesn't have almost anything to offend anybody now anymore. This is not a bad thing. I'm not saying this as a bad thing, but this is a piece of outrageous, scabrous entertainment done at a time, but that time has passed.
Yeah.
And so it's not outrageous anymore, and it's not as venom dripped anymore as it used to be. In fact, it's almost even hard to see the venom. And frankly, I see everybody having a good time. All right, is what I see going on.
In 1965, to eviscerate the space race and the military involved in the space race is a kind of like, he's calling everybody out.
I'm not saying that then it wasn't that, but frankly, more than anything we've watched since we've been doing this series, but I would even go so far as to say more than anything I've seen in the last 2 years, and I'm talking about watching movies from the 30s and watching silent movies or whatever, The Loved One is so drastically a movie of its time.
Yeah.
You almost have to project yourself into that time to even kind of get it. When we were watching the movie, I'm not connected with it. I'm enjoying it well enough. You're watching it with me. You're hearing me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But most of those laughs are, oh, that's funny. Laughs, as opposed to actually it tickling my funny bone and provoking
that's meant to be funny.
Yeah, I'm not saying that didn't happen a few times, but it didn't happen that often, and mostly it was a whole lot of, oh, that's kind of funny. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, that's clever. Oh, that's neat. It's a comment on it. And then I think made my first real comment on the movie about 50 minutes into it. I go, I feel like I'm watching a black and white Batman episode. And that was so fucking right on to the type of humor that's going on. I mean, the script is written by Terry Southern and Christopher Esherwood and
Terry Southern who wrote
Dr. Strangelove, and Christopher Esherwood who wrote
who's
Frankenstein: The True Story, one of my favorite TV movies of all time. All right,
still the best Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely. But Lorenzo Simple could have just as well be, working on this script. It has that same kind of thing. Not only that, you have Batman actors popping up in the thing. You have
people who would be doing guest stars and playing villains. On Batman.
Well, you do that. Okay, Milton Berle played a bad guy on Batman.
Milton Berle is in everything of this period.
Liberace played a bad guy on Batman.
You're right.
Alfred the Butler has got a small part.
That's right.
In the film, and
he plays one of the English.
And Rod Steiger as Joy Boy is basically playing Victor Buono as a Batman villain in this movie. Okay, but when I say Batman, that's not me being facetious. That's just picking up on this satirical pop culture kind of comedy that Batman didn't start, but definitely was one of the more popular versions. Mm-hmm. Then it stopped being Batman, which by comparison actually has a through line. And then it turned into a Monkeys episode. When it becomes that they're all at that room or whatever, it's like, well, this is just a fucking Monkeys episode.
When they're all in the I don't know what they call it, a waiting room.
Oh, yeah, when they bring everybody, all the cast members together pretty much.
All the military guys come into the room and there's a bunch of coffins and they start opening them up.
That was, okay.
And there's women inside them and they're like, all right, baby, rockets away, or something like that. The guy jumps in the coffin.
That was the Monkeys episode. However, if they all started fighting each other and they cut to pows and zooms and gonks, all right, then it would be a Batman episode.
Okay, so I thought about that, what you said, and the Monkeys thing also. Mm-hmm. And, for a long while, I used to watch the Monkeys to learn about cinema. There was...
Bob Rafelson did direct it.
Exactly.
I will go so far as to say that Bob Rafelson's direction of Head is one of the best directed movies in 1969.
For sure. Yeah, actually, I'll go with you on that. Great cinema is usually created out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so for the Monkeys, you've got like one day to shoot 20 scenes or something. Mm-hmm. And you've got the Monkeys and you've got a room full of people and there's a bunch of action going on. How are you going to cover it? We don't have time to do master single. Mm-hmm. All we have time for is master. It's like, that's what we got. And so frequently on the Monkeys, they would shoot a master shot, a wide shot, let chaos ensue, and then punch in using pan and scan. Mm-hmm. And then they would literally be digitally scanning and creating shots within one single shot, a master shot. So that's just, being efficient. But when I watch those things and that kind of strange panning, scanning, digital tracking that they do, it's fascinating to me. To me, that's cinema when I watch it. Now, The Loved One, if it bears any kind of similarity to television of that time period, it's partly because when you shoot comedy, when you're shooting, I don't know, Jim Carrey, you know what you've got scripted, but you don't know what he's going to do. And you don't want to be the dickhead who's too close, that you miss it, or that you try to push your cinema on Jim Carrey and not capture his spontaneous moment. No, the best thing you can do to service the film is to step back and capture the action. And so a lot of this movie is shot in these kind of long, wide takes, these wide takes. And part of the reason he's doing that is because Richardson is looking for spontaneity. He was constantly asking Morse, like, what can you do? What would you do? What would you do that would be weird here? Well, I would kiss the tit of the statue. Okay, then do that. That's exactly what Roger Avery would do. Roger Avery would say, hey, why don't you spit on that other actor and see what happens? Then you go to the other actor and say, hey, don't let him do anything to you. You push him back. If he comes on you, you manipulate people to make it as real as possible. I feel Richardson doing that in this, especially when I look at the editing style in The Loved One, which I was always really enamored with.
The editing style, where I had an ultimate problem with it as a movie is in the first half, it was what it was, and it was enjoyable enough. I wasn't ever caught up into it, but it was enjoyable enough as this comedy relic of this time and of this sensibility. It's the sensibility that's of its time more than anything else.
Yeah.
And my problem with the film as a movie is in the last half an hour when it switches over mostly to the Anjanette Comer character. And then the film starts taking her seriously and starts taking itself seriously. And I don't take her seriously, and I vaguely resent the movie trying to get sincere.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I agree. I think we talked about it a little bit that that Richardson, and specifically probably at a certain point in the film, or maybe it's Hal Ashby realizes at a certain point in the film, we haven't really earned that with her. And they try to squeeze it all in what feels like 5 consecutive scenes or sequences where they quickly jam in.
Well, it's the only time
quality.
It's the only time the movie has any true coherence, because it actually is telling her story, but I don't care about her story.
Yeah. The only thing that's necessary to tell in her story is that she's become disillusioned by everything in the world.
That's true, but then the movie hurts itself by ignoring Robert Morris for that long, concentrating on her, but also equally concentrating on Jonathan Winters. I think Jonathan Winters is a whole smack dab in the center of this movie. Look, for the dads of Gen Xers, Jonathan Winters was considered the funniest guy on the planet. He was like your dad's favorite hippest comedian. Maybe somebody like George Carlin, maybe somebody like Flip Wilson, but for the most part, Jonathan Winters was your dad's genius. Was your dad's comedy genius. And I bought that for a long, long period of time. And I don't buy it anymore. I still like him in It's a Mad, Mad World. And if he's sitting there with Merv Griffin and just taking items, taking the coffee cup, taking a pencil, taking a comb, and then riffing, improvising 6 different things that comb could be, there's nobody better than him. But I don't think he's that good of an actor. And this shows the limits to how not a good actor he is. And the fact that he's trying to replace Peter Sellers, who I have my own issues about being overrated. All right. But nevertheless, having said that, you can't even hold a flickering birthday candle compared to what Peter Sellers does in Dr. Strangelove and what Jonathan Winters does in this. He's just not only is he not able to pull off the double role, it's a true comedian pulling it up. There's just nothing there. There's no character there. Where by comparison, Rod Steiger is playing a ridiculous character, but he's a self-serious actor, and he's a real human being.
Well, it's interesting. Rod Steiger shows up just after the death of John Gielgud, which is just in time.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
John Gielgud is so magnificent.
No, John
in the
Gielgud,
movie. He's the heart and soul of this film.
The heart the movie has, John Gielgud takes with him when he exits the picture.
That shot of him leaving the studio, where we don't even see what he's looking at when he looks back at the studio, but just him walking out and the melancholic music that's playing and his look back.
And the back and forth with the stupid fucking secretary.
Oh, yeah. That whole I'm told that you've been here 31 years. I hope I'm not here that long.
I'm sure that's a fate that will not befall you.
Yeah. He has such poetic lines in this. There's a line that I love that he delivers to Robert Morris when he's talking about the good old days. Ah, yes, the swimming pool. It was like a great aquarium flashing with the limbs of beauties. All, alas, long since departed. Golden lads and girls, all must as chimney sweepers come to dust. That is such a beautiful line.
It's a great
And I'll tell you something. I haven't been able to understand that line until I sat down and started like what the hell is he saying there? I've never understood what he said because it's so lyrically spoken. And then Robert Morris's character, like, because he's a poet, you can see his like appreciation that his uncle just exudes poetry constantly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom and a lot of criticism, a lot of really smart criticism going on, exuding.
Well, it would appear the John Gielgud character is the Evelyn Waugh's mouthpiece.
He is. He's Evelyn Waugh, basically.
Yeah.
And when he dies, when he passes away, and we are now in the world of Joy Boy, of Dr. Joy Boy. Thank God Rod Steiger is there to pick up.
Yes.
Because he does. He takes the ball and he runs with it. And I think you asked me why I love this movie. It's Rod Steiger. That's actually why I love this movie. It's Rod Steiger. It's Mr. Joy Boy and the revelation that you don't know anybody until you've been to their home. Joy Boy has some of the most amazing moments. And when we go home to his house and we meet Mom.
Okay. Do you like that part?
Yes. To me, she's
fucking disgusting.
That's one of the reasons I love it.
Made me want to fucking gag.
When she's trying to pull the turkey.
Edith Massey eating fucking eggs is less disgusting than this fucking woman.
Eileen Gibbons.
Yeah.
Eileen Gibbons credited on the box. That's how powerful her performance is.
I mean, what's remarkable
when he's trying to pull the turkey out of her hands to help her.
Oh my God, that's making me fucking vomit in my mouth.
I need my little Gandhi bird. I call him Gandhi because he's so skinny. I just love that.
I mean, what's crazy is how I did not realize that there was this forerunner to John Waters just sitting there in 60s cinema, just waiting to be discovered.
John Waters discovered it.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Apparently. But nevertheless. And also there's there's a comedy to Edith Massey's kook that's not there. Joy Boy's mother. Joy Boy has it.
Well, Joy Boy definitely has it. And we talked about this and I showed it to you because the videotape still has the reel changes.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly a print. There's a real change in this movie. I mean, in the old days, people may not even realize this now, since nowadays it feels like you just deliver everything on one MPV file.
What's a reel, Uncle Roger?
Yeah, movies used to come in reels of about 10, or sometimes 12. Twice as hard, 12 reels if you had a really big movie. And during the movie, you would do a reel change. And if you're curious about it, I suppose you can watch Fight Club and Brad Pitt explains what a reel change is. They have cigarette burn marks to show I don't think it's really done by a cigarette, but maybe in the old days. But the idea is that when the projectionist sees the blip, the projectionist changes the reels. Okay, so this has always been for editors a dilemma, because basically what you're doing is you're leaving the editing up to the projectionist.
Yeah. You never want a real change to happen, like an exact cut has to happen. You always want a bit of overflow in there, so it doesn't matter.
It's like a sloppy cut or a hard cut or an indistinct cut by a couple of frames, right. Because you're leaving it really up to somebody else. Mostly people are trying to just mitigate
the damage that a projectionist can cause.
To make the flow good. But this movie was edited by Hal Ashby, who's one of the greatest editors of all time and one of my favorite directors as well. And so there's a moment in the film at the Joy Boy house where Mr. Joy Boy Rod Steiger is making dinner and he's talking to Anjanette Comer, who's come over and she is just...
What's her name again? Miss
Dinatogenous.
Yeah,
Miss Dinatogenous. She's come over because she's in love with him as an artist at work, and she's come over because he's romantically interested
but she's considering it now. She's not
considering it, but then she shows up at his house and she sees who he really is,
and
what his life really is. More importantly, that he's got big mom who he's got to take care of. And he's got this weird perverse life that she didn't know about. And so he's in there and he's telling her about this dream that he has. Oh, and I go down to the big supermarket on La Brea and, I buy lobsters by the dozen the way other people buy eggs and, for mom. And I show up and everybody at the supermarket sees me coming and they say, Daddy's little joy boy loves lobster, lobster. Mom's little joy boy loves lobster tonight or something like that. Everybody's all happy. And then the dream changes. The dream turns into a nightmare. And he begins describing how the dream is a nightmare. And what Hal Ashby does is he takes the dream part where he's telling the fantastic part of the dream, and then right as the dream changes, the real change comes. So we have this disjarring cut, this emotionally jarring cut. And after that cut,
as the story changes.
And after that cut, he literally says, and then the dream changes. And then he describes a nightmare that comes after that of the lobsters.
No, that was
eating mom.
I wouldn't have even. I wouldn't have noticed that, but you pointed it out, and that was really great.
I think that is one of the most important moments in cinema, and I think it's a thing of beauty to watch.
Before we wrap this up and go to a break and bring Gala in, one of the things that was actually kind of funny to me is, look, there's always these really funny moments. I'm not laughing from my heart. I'm laughing from my head. But I really enjoyed the Liberace section.
The Liberace section is
I thought
incredible.
He was terrific. I thought the Tab Hunter spiel that he's giving as the tour guide, and just having the fact that Tab Hunter doing it was really cool. And the only era that I like Milton Berle is this era, because it seems like 2 years after It's a Mad, Mad World, and he could almost be playing the same fucking guy.
He almost play. It's like the character from Mad Men, Mad
Yeah,
World.
he's almost played the same guy, just being married to somebody else. And then I actually do like the astronaut's wife, Barbara Nichols. I actually thought that scene was kind of sexy.
I love it when he says, will you be able to? She's like, oh, I know how to play that scene. Like she's got to dress. She's a stripper, and she's got to go be in front of all the astronauts and everything. He's like, oh, I know how to play that scene.
I've heard actually that Jane Mansfield actually did a cameo for The Loved One, and it got cut out.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll bet there was a lot that they cut out of the movie, a lot of cameos and a lot of extra stuff. Like when you're making a movie that's collected chaos, that happens. There's my least favorite moment in Doctor Strangelove is the Coke machine gag.
Oh yeah.
Where Bat Guano shoots the Coke machine. It's when he says, you're gonna have to deal with the Coca-Cola company, and then he shoots the Coke machine and he looks down at it and it sprays in his face. It's a conventional comedy gag that somehow got into that.
It's way above time movie.
Like it is way beneath Kubrick's level of comedy, and he's trying to do normal. I'll do normal comedy the way a normal human being would do it.
Yeah.
And he tries, and Kubrick's just not that kind of a comedian. He's a different kind. He works at a much higher level.
Pauline Kael talks about that in Phantom of the Paradise, when Beef slips on his shoes and can't get up again, and you have Jessica Harper laughing. She goes, okay, De Palma is such a director, he can't even film those scenes.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it's not like any directors like filming those scenes ever. Yeah. But they're at least capable of doing it.
Well, there's a lot of those scenes in The Loved One that I think are just not that funny. Like a lot of the stuff that I think is intended to be, ha-ha funny gags, I frankly don't find that funny. What I find funny is the awkwardness and the uncomfortable parts, the more elevated humor, frankly, I think is genius. Whereas the other stuff, I feel like it's playing for what a general audience might expect when they come to see a yuck comedy. Yeah. And he's just trying to deliver that I think for that component of the audience.
The movie cannot be separated from its time. When you watch it, it is a product of its time, and you need to kind of go back to that sensibility if you're going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.